Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily. Could a half-a-century-old cold case finally be solved?
This DNA comparison is something we're really pushing for.
Who the case breakers say is the man behind the mask of the Zodiac killer. And the saga continues for the Doomsday Duo, where the trial of accused murderer Chad Daybell could take place. Plus, what the jury will know leading into Markeith Loyd's second trial for murder.
Mr. Loyd was convicted and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
And later,
ladies and gentlemen, you have all the evidence you need to find this defendant guilty. That's what the state is asking you to do today.
the jury is deliberating in the Mennonite murder trial. How long Airman Mark Gooch could face behind bars if convicted. Law and Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmeyer along with Terry Austin. A volunteer group of cold case detectives believes they've developed a prime suspect in the decades-old Zodiac killer case in California. But as Law and Crime's Anjanette Levy tells us, the FBI and others say not so fast.
Brian, the Case Breakers is an all-volunteer group, as you mentioned, made up of former police officers, prosecutors, even some military members. They believe they've identified a prime suspect as the Zodiac killer who terrorized the San Francisco area, killing 5 people in the late 1960s.
This is Gary Francis Post, a house painter who died in 2018. The Case Breakers believe he could be the Zodiac killer.
We believe that he is the person of interest who should be at the top of the suspect list. I'll put it like that. He has the most information and evidence pointing in his direction out of anybody that we've looked at.
Casebreaker Jen Buchholz says Post was trained in cryptography and ciphers in the Air Force. Those ciphers were the Zodiac killer's hallmark. The Casebreakers point to circumstantial evidence. 4 head scars on composite sketches they claim match scars on Post's forehead. And there's more.
He has the same size, shoe size, I should say, as the boot prints found at some of the crime scenes. He was known to wear the same style or brand of boots.
Buchholz believes Post could be responsible for the 1966 murder of Sherry Jo Bates in Riverside, California. A watch was left at the scene. A 1975 FBI memo identified Bates as the 6th victim of the Zodiac killer. But a Riverside PD spokesperson tells Law and Crime, our homicide cold case unit has determined the murder of Sherry Jo Bates in 1966 is not related to the Zodiac killer. We have worked with the FBI Los Angeles Investigative Genealogy Unit on our case, and although any link to the Zodiac killer has been ruled out, they and various other law enforcement agencies continue to work those unsolved murders.
That is an invalid claim until the Zodiac killer has been positively identified.
The Casebreakers also claim to have a whistleblower identifying Post as the Zodiac killer. For its part, the San Francisco office of the FBI tweeted, "The FBI's investigation into the Zodiac killer remains open and unsolved." That said, the Casebreakers believe Gary Post is worth a look.
He has the most information and evidence pointing in his direction out of anybody that we've looked at.
Now, you're probably wondering why the Case Breakers decided to go public with this information. They said that they actually reached out to law enforcement first, hoping to collaborate, but they say that those overtures were not accepted. They would like Gary Post's DNA profile compared to DNA collected from the murders. Brian?
Thanks, Anjanette. Joining us today is former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi and Terry Austin. Gene, you've worked with the FBI to prosecute cases. How could the FBI be viewing the Casebreakers' findings, and why do you think they're hesitating to agree with their results?
Well, answer number one, the FBI is probably looking at the potential murderer in this case with a fine-tooth comb. I think they are sincere in saying this case is still open. But number two, Mr. Post has never been charged. He's never gone to trial. He's passed away. So I'm sure that the superiors in the FBI do not want to convict somebody who hasn't been charged and had his day in court. And number three, what I hear from this story is they're looking at the fur on someone's brow, the size of his boots. They're trying to link him to a victim that the other law enforcement official says has nothing to do with the Zodiac killer. So at this point, he may be a person of interest, but it's pretty darn speculative and that's why the FBI is not commenting, and I think that's a good decision.
Absolutely. Now, Terry, it could be other things as well. Do you think it's their results, who came up with the results, or something in between that's causing people to question if Post is in fact the Zodiac killer?
Well, I think people are questioning it because it's all circumstantial evidence. I mean, look, he is someone that we should look at because a lot of the circumstantial evidence does point to him. But in order to convict someone in a criminal case, you have to have it beyond a reasonable doubt. And here, the circumstantial evidence, as Jean just mentioned, is really light just because there might be similar boots or because there might be a scar in the eyebrow. I don't think that that's enough. And I think, like Anjanette said, if we can put this back to the DNA, I think that's a good way of making it more substantial.
Absolutely. Anjanette, this whistleblower, only identified as Will, claims to know where weapons are buried, right?
Yeah, that is a claim that he has made to a reporter who has covered the case and also, I guess, to the case breakers. This man named Will claims that he was part of Post's criminal posse at some point and claims to know where weapons may be buried in the High Sierra Mountains. Jen Buchholz told me they can't just go up there with Will and dig around. Law enforcement would actually have to accompany them and do that in order to protect the chain of custody, should anything found in that location be relevant.
Interesting, and thank you all for that input on this interesting case. On to other top legal news. Human remains are uncovered in the search for missing woman Lauren Cho. Cho, often known by her nickname Elle, was last seen in June. Her boyfriend says she went walking into the Yucca Valley Desert without food or water. Over the weekend, officials discovered remains in the same area of the desert. Cho's case rose to fame in September after the media's coverage of Gabby Petito's disappearance shed light on the lack of coverage for minority persons missing. The remains found this weekend are still unidentified. Officials say it could take weeks before a cause of death or identity is determined. And today marks 1 month since Gabby Petito was reported missing. This as the FBI confirms a body found in North Carolina is not that of fiancé Brian Laundrie. Laundrie has been missing for nearly a month after he left to go hiking in a Florida reserve without his cell phone or wallet. This weekend, a body was found along the Blue Ridge Parkway in North Carolina. This comes after dozens of reported sightings of Laundrie along the Appalachian Trail in that area. The FBI issued a statement saying that there is no evidence that the body is Laundrie's or related to his manhunt. Last week, officials confirmed Laundrie was under surveillance before he went missing. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, Markeith Loyd is back in the courtroom, now onto his second trial for murder. But first, the twists and turns of the Doomsday Duo continue to make waves. A judge grants the defense motion for a new location in the upcoming trial of Chad Daybell. All that and more next.
Hi, this is Dan Abrams with exciting news for all of our Law and Crime followers on YouTube. You can now get the live Law and Crime Network with YouTubeTV for all of your daily live trial coverage, legal news, expert analysis, and original true crime programs. Subscribe to YouTubeTV today and then locate Law and Crime in the channel guide. And for only $1.99 a month, you can add the network to your bundle. Watch Law and Crime every day with YouTubeTV. We put you in the jury box.
Welcome back to Law and Crime Daily. On the heels of newly released police interviews and intimate text messages between the so-called Doomsday Duo, an Idaho judge rules a change of venue for the trial of Chad Daybell. Daybell and wife Lori Vallow Daybell are charged with multiple crimes, including conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder, in connection to the deaths of Lori's children, Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow. Both were last seen alive in September 2019. Their bodies were found in June 2020 on Chad Daybell's property. On top of this, the couple's relationship carries with it a string of mysterious deaths. Lori Vallow Daybell's second husband, Charles Vallow, was shot and killed by her brother in July 2019. Her brother, Alex Cox, would die in December 2019 of what was ruled a pulmonary blood clot. Chad Daybell's wife, Tammy, died in her sleep on October 2019. Daybell refused an autopsy. Just 2 weeks later, he and Lori got married. The couple would go on to be known as the Doomsday Duo for their strong religious convictions and apocalyptic beliefs. In regards to his upcoming trial, Daybell's attorneys argued a fair and impartial jury could not be found in Fremont County, Idaho. The state pushed back, opting for a sequestered jury that could be brought in from another part of the state. In the end, the judge ruled in favor of Daybell for a change of venue. The trial will likely be held in capital city Boise. A date for the trial has not yet been set. Meanwhile, Lori Vallow Daybell's trial is on hold after a judge declared her mentally unfit to stand trial. Let's bring back former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi and Terry Austin to discuss this change in Chad Daybell's case. Terry, Daybell's case will be heard in Ada County, some 300 miles from Fremont County. How much does this change such a high-profile trial?
You know, I don't think it's going to change it at all, Brian, and I'm a little surprised the judge actually granted the defense motion. Everyone is entitled, obviously, to a fair and impartial jury, but all the jurors in this case, no matter where they are in the state of Idaho, knows about the case. The question is, can they be fair? So it's a little surprising that they moved it. But the one thing I will say, the judge probably is protecting the trial because as far as an appeal is concerned, that will be one less appealable issue.
Absolutely. Gene, do you think the judge's decision had anything to do with the Chandler, Arizona PD's massive dump of information? And how could this affect Lori Vallow Daybell's case?
Well, the amount of information that came from Arizona could have affected the judge if the judge thought that there was an explosion of publicity in the area where the trial was going to be tried. And I agree with Terry. Moving at 300 miles in a state like this is not going to make one bit of difference because everybody in that state knows about the Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow case. Now, how is it going to affect Lori Vallow? We'll see. I mean, she's now being suspended, if you will, for cases because of mental incompetence or the issue of whether she's competent to stand trial. I don't know if it's going to affect that decision, but it could. Either way, her trial's not going to be going on anytime soon. His now has another venue, but I don't think it's going to make any difference, as Terry just said.
Absolutely. Thank you both for that input on the Daybell case. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, the jury is out for deliberation in the trial of Arizona versus Mark Gooch. Plus, jury selection is underway as Markeith Loyd begins his second trial for murder. What instructions the judge has given to potential jurors next. Welcome back. Jury selection is underway in Orlando, Florida for the second murder trial for defendant Markeith Loyd. Loyd is charged with the murder of Lieutenant Deborah Clayton. This will be Loyd's second time potentially facing the death penalty after a previous conviction for the 2016 murder of his ex-girlfriend, Shade Dixon. The jury recommended life in prison without parole for that conviction. Prosecutors say that Loyd gunned down Lieutenant Clayton after she attempted to arrest him for Dixon's murder. Police spent 9 days searching for him before finding him in an abandoned house. The trial was delayed for more than a year due to the pandemic and continued on Monday with jury selection. Questions for the jury include what they already know about Markeith Loyd and what they think about the insanity defense. Loyd's defense team plans to argue self-defense and insanity. During questioning, potential jurors were told up front about Loyd's previous charges and conviction.
Mr. Loyd's trial for the killing of Shade Dixon and her unborn child began on September 27, 2019, and concluded on October 23, 2019. Mr. Loyd was convicted and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
Here to break down Markeith's second homicide trial is former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi and co-host Terry Austin. Terry, insanity defense. Is this a last-ditch effort by the defense, or is there something here? I mean, how can you be insane if you're shooting at an officer trying to bring you in?
Right. Here, the defense is taking advantage of the insanity defense in Florida. And you have to prove by clear and convincing evidence that at the time of the crime, the defendant was suffering from mental disease. And we don't have that type of evidence here. The type of evidence we have is that he was fleeing, trying to get away, and that he knowingly shot the officer and killed her. So I don't think that the insanity defense applies here. He knew the difference between right and wrong.
All right, we'll see how that plays out, but I tend to agree with you there, Terry. Gene, so the judge tells the jury that Loyd was being arrested for murdering his girlfriend and unborn child. He was convicted, but not to consider that for this case. Should that information have been kept out?
Judge made a bad ruling. I don't care if the prosecutor or the defense asked for it. The judge is the umpire. You can allow the arrest to come in because that gives motive as to why he's fleeing and why he has the motive to take the life of the lieutenant. But you should never put in the conviction. Once the jury hears conviction for murder of a victim who's pregnant, my goodness gracious, that it's game over. But I got to tell you this, there may be some method in the madness of the defense attorneys. If this is a death penalty case, maybe they're trying to take the sting out of something that could come out in the penalty phase. If that's their theory, I kind of understand it. Wow. As for paranoia as a mental disease, that's a very rational emotional response to be paranoid when you're fleeing the police for murdering your ex-girlfriend.
Absolutely. We'll see how it plays out as the case of Markeith Loyd continues. When we come back, the fate of Mark Gooch is now in the hands of an Arizona jury. How long the United States Airmen could face behind bars for the murder of 27-year-old schoolteacher Sasha Krause. The latest in the Mennonite murder trial after this. Welcome back. The jury is out for deliberation in Arizona's Mennonite murder trial. That's where 22-year-old Mark Gooch faces life in prison for the murder of schoolteacher Sasha Krause. Krause was last seen alive in January 2020 outside her Mennonite community in Farmington, New Mexico. Her body was found a month later near Flagstaff, Arizona. A later autopsy determined Krause's cause of death to be blunt force trauma and a gunshot wound to the head. At the time of her abduction and murder, Mark Gooch was stationed at an Air Force base in Phoenix, Arizona. Cell phone records show Gooch in the Farmington, New Mexico village on the night that Krause went missing. His cell phone later pinged near the area where Krause's body would be found. Witness testimony confirmed Gooch asked his brother to wipe his cell phone upon being arrested and asked a friend to store a rifle. The prosecution alleges he used to shoot and kill Krause. On Friday, the prosecution and defense gave impassioned closing arguments. Defense attorneys argue there was no recorded contact between Gooch and Krause before her murder, and that there is no DNA evidence linking him to the crime. The prosecution pushed back, saying Gooch did not need to personally know Krause for it to be considered premeditated murder.
They found no mention of Sasha Krause ever. They found no call from him to her or vice versa at either of their call records. No search history about Sasha Krause, the Mennonite community. It's clear that there has been no establishment whatsoever that he knew her or that she knew him. Hello? No Google search of Farmington Mennonite community, none of that occurred. You heard Detective Strang, the lead detective from San Juan County Sheriff's Department, tell you that there was nothing found in the car that was of benefit. They didn't present their lab person. They didn't present their expert person. But he told you that. So we know they have no data in the car that leads to Mr. Gooch. No fibers, no hair, no blood, no Gooch. Nothing that you could connect.
Once you find out that the defendant and believe that the defendant was the one that committed this, it's game over. This is premeditated murder. Premeditated murder does not require a plan, does not require that the defendant knew Sasha Krause. Is it the defense contention that everybody who murders somebody knows the victim? Again, use your common sense, your reason, and your experience. There is no requirement that there be some plan written down on a napkin somewhere, or that he has some kind of plan to kill Sasha in particular. What we do know is that the defendant abducted her from her community and took her to a faraway location, a remote location of his choosing, where he killed her. And that's premeditated murder. Shooting someone in the back of the head with intent is premeditated murder. And I would suggest, the state would suggest, The fact that the defendant did not have communications with Sasha makes this even more terrifying.
Gene, at the very least, the defense has some arguments there. We saw there in their kind of PowerPoint presentation of no DNA, no connection between Krause and Gooch. Is there any reasonable doubt here?
I think very little. And I got to critique the prosecutor, whom I've complimented before. I think there was a plan. You don't have to have it on a napkin, but he planned. He planned his trip up to the Mennonite community up in New Mexico. He planned his trip to the state park or national park. He planned his trip back. He planned a location where there would be no cell phone contact. And here's what else he planned. No communication with Sasha Krause because he knew he was going to find a victim. He just didn't know who it was. That was the essential element of his plan.
All right, interesting to see how that played out. That would have been a great summation as well, Gene. Terry, did the prosecution address the defense's arguments well enough to push this case beyond a reasonable doubt, or is there still some there?
Brian, I don't have any reasonable doubt, but I think one or two jurors just might have some reasonable doubt. And there, if that happens, you can get a deadlock jury, and we might eventually even get a mistrial. I think I agree with Gene. The prosecution did an excellent job. He told the jury, look at the big picture. Use your common sense. Don't focus on the microscopic details, because it's the big picture that really is important here. And he pointed out the fact that the experts really were different. One was credible, meaning his experts, and the other was not. So I think he did address the issue.
Absolutely, and I think you did very well. Thank you both. And thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.